Hello and welcome. This is the Female Athlete Podcast, Hear Her Sports, a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. I am so glad you are here listening. Today, I am talking to Natasha Camy, an NCAA Division I women's basketball referee. She's also an all-around rock star, powerhouse, go-getter, and enthusiastic, impressive person. And she grew up in West Philadelphia like I did, so we had a fun place to start our offline conversation. You might want to check out the show notes to see where I used to get pizza in Philadelphia. NCAA basketball just started, and Natasha is now in her 14th season. In her career, she has officiated at the very top level, including in this past season's Elite Eight game featuring LSU and Iowa, which was recently confirmed as one of the most watched women's basketball games in history. There's a link to a replay of that matchup in the show notes, and yes, you can see Natasha on the court running back and forth. Natasha has also officiated in the Conference USA Championship, Big Ten Conference Playoffs, Big Ten Final, SEC Conference Playoffs, WNIT Final, WBIT Quarterfinal, and Final. She has been around basketball and studying the game since she was very, very young. It was in fact her grandmother, a ref herself, who suggested that Natasha give reffing a go. So clearly, this is a family thing. In the episode, Natasha and I talk about how she prepares for games, nerves, cute interactions with players, and how things have changed in the 14 years she's been officiating. It was so amazing to talk to Natasha about women's basketball because she is so clearly a fan, but is also super professional. For example, she's not able to reveal what game she's assigned to, and I might have tried to get her to tell me which players she is excited to watch this season, and Natasha was having none of it. I loved it. Beyond her own officiating career, Natasha is helping others grow in the profession. She tells us about Referee Ready Academy, the referee development training program she founded and runs. I was fascinated by the program's holistic approach to being a ref and what that actually means. It sounds woo-woo, but is incredibly practical. Before we get to it, as a reminder, between episodes, I send out a newsletter to write a little bit about issues in women's sports, plus this and that related to the episodes and to the guests. The newsletters are mostly my take on things and what I've thought about since talking to these wonderful women. The newsletter is also a perfect way to stay up to date on each episode that comes out. Easily sign up for that from the banner at the top of Hear Her Sports homepage. Maybe it was the West Philadelphia connection, but Natasha and I sure had lots to talk about and had lots of fun doing so. So let's say hello to Natasha Camy. Well, Natasha, it is great to have you here. Thank you. Hello, welcome. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
I'm very excited as well.
Our conversation won't air, before everyone knows who wins the WNBA championships. But
Ooh.
Yes, but tell me what you think about this season, the playoffs so far. I mean, I assume you're watching.
Oh my gosh, am I watching? If
course.
the ball is bouncing, in the words of my wife, I'm watching.
Okay.
So I've definitely been watching. I had two young women that I've known since they started. Was able to work as officials this year for them.
Oh, wow.
So super happy for them. Very excited for them. Since their first season, they did not make it into the playoffs, obviously, but they had a great first season. And so I was watching for multiple purposes. A lot of the players that I refereed in the collegiate realm last year, were part of that big draft. And so, I'm always hoping that they do well, just as like little bunnies I used to see all the time, and now they're blossoming. And so, when I watch the WNBA, I'm watching for multiple facets, as a former women's basketball athlete and, someone who just truly loves the game in all aspects of it. Seeing a league that I aspire to play for when it was created and before it was created, doing so well and getting its due justice, I mean, like my heart's full every time, really, truly.
What do you think of all this growth?
I think it's phenomenal. I think, we've had great players go into the WNBA, play overseas, etc., forever, right? And just the amount of spots that are available and how many players kind of went to the wayside. Like, I see these players in the collegiate ranks, so I see them, for 4 years, and now with COVID, maybe 5 or 6, but for 4 years for sure, right? And so, I really understand the amount of work and level of play that they can play at, and just to know that there weren't enough spots, and some of their stories weren't really expanded on, and they had such great stories to tell, and to see this class bring more light to some of the players that have already been there, and obviously the players that will be coming in after them, really is just I'm not an OG per se, but I mean I've loved women's basketball since I feel like the day I was born, and so it's very exciting. I'm super protective about it. And obviously you want something that has so much potential to be done right, but with so many different fans coming in, as we've seen, it has brought some other aspects to the game, but you kind of have to take what kind of comes at you in the way, because you're expanding to different markets. But I think keeping the main thing, which is the product that's on the floor, and focus is most important.
What kind of worries do you have? It sounds like you had some worries.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I worry that, the women athletes wouldn't be treated as the athletes that they are, right? I think about when I played, it was like, oh, can you do a crossover? Like just like some of the, the naivete, right? Of
Yeah,
like,
sure.
these are real athletes, right? Like these women are lifting, they're eating right, they're taking care of their mental health. A lot of them are activists, they're so multidimensional, and I didn't want people coming in and just being like, oh, this young lady, appeals to me in a way that I aesthetically like to look at, right? And you take away all the hard work that she's worked for. Or, oh, she went to this school, and so I'm familiar with her for that reason, but she can't play with someone who's from this background. No, 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 no. That is the beauty of sport. It's like being on a team with so many different people, and finding a way to go after a common goal, which is a championship, in their respective guards. And, I was concerned, that we would be caught up in things that didn't really show the inner depths of like the athlete for a woman. Like we've gone through so many stories of like baseball players, male baseball players. We've had the Netflix show on F1 drivers, and we've had multiple shows on basketball players, right? And so like we've gotten to see them in different lights, but like, do we get to see our players as moms, as leaders of businesses, of just so many things that they are able to do and be a professional athlete? I'm just always concerned that we're not necessarily digging in to that.
I also want to see the athletes for their athletic prowess. Like let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah. Dude. Like, just, I mean, again, I'm sitting in a fan seat. I just want to be very clear. I'm in a fan
Sure.
seat right
Yeah.
now. Because as an official, there's different lenses that I'm looking at the game. But just as a fan, right? Like the pace of play and the ability to pass and catch the ball at different points of the game and really finish at the rim, like we have multiple young ladies who can definitely touch rim and probably dunk if they really, really wanted to, right? It's not just like a one-off, but the creativity that they're able to do, the way that they read plays, like, the slip screen in basketball terms, where you like go to set the screen, but you actually just roll to the basket. I mean, the efficiency of how that's done, for some of the teams that are in the final, it's just phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just great basketball. Who doesn't want to watch that? Like, I mean, I'm in awe of just, the intellect of IQ that they have about the game. Is just, I mean, we're seeing the best of the best right now, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Are you able to watch the games as a fan, or do you always have your official hat on?
It never comes off.
Oh
It
no.
never comes off. It's like, even if I'm watching Elizabeth, like, I'm like in fan mode, I'm like, oh, what was that though? Like, my eye is still trained to see, like, is that screen really legal? What was her pivot foot, right? Like things that you probably would never care about. But it's like I can't turn it off, right?
I
But I
don't
kind
think
of,
I would see it.
no, you probably wouldn't. Where were we on that play? Like, is that something that we could get? Or I love that layoff on that call. Like, like I can't turn that off. That
Sure.
that's part of me now, for sure.
I do want to talk about all of that. However, first, a little bit about your history, because you have said, many times in interviews that you got into refereeing through your grandmother.
That is
And
correct.
first of all, that story is amazing. But second of all, it's like your grandmother, she must have been such a strong, groundbreaking woman to be involved in refereeing back then. I mean, there can't have been a lot of female referees back then.
No, absolutely not. And definitely not women at her age, right? And so,
Yeah.
um, she had to have been in her late 60s. No, maybe like 60s for sure, maybe mid to late. And, I was in college, so I was like, Grandma, what are you doing? Like, girl, like, come on. And she was a big tennis fan. She played tennis her whole life. She played basketball. She actually traveled for tennis. And so when she got into officiating, it was just a way for her to be able to really just keep her sharpness. But I don't even know how she thought to officiate, right? I think she just saw it as a way to kind of help little players play basketball. Where if you've ever watched a little kids game, is there a lot of walking? Yes. Is there a lot of passing maybe out of bounds? Yes. And like the caretaker in her allowed her to kind of like still get that feel without the intensity of where I am at, right? And it was a way to make some extra money. Come on now. Like, I think that at the time they were paying like $25 a game. You could work 8 games in a day. I mean, for a college kid, you could have told me I hit the lotto, right? So, um, just thinking about how much of a trailblazer she was at that time to think, oh, I should probably try this out. I'm not seeing anyone else that looks like me doing it locally or even maybe on TV. Her age wasn't something that she thought, I can't do this. She thought, I can do this, right? And then, oh, you know what? I think my granddaughter would be great at this. Let me make sure that she understands what it is and kind of push her along and see how it goes. I can truly say she did not see this being my career, but I know that she knew that I loved the game and this is a great way to stay close to it.
Well, it sounds like you immediately took to it and also were good very quickly, and like you were quite young compared to other people. So
Oh yeah.
why did you take to it so quickly? And why were you good, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think I talk about this a lot with our members, for our referee ready. It's just like, you know, we have officials who played the game, we have officials who coached the game, we have people who just love the game and thought officiating could be a great way for them. I think for me, like I said, I've loved basketball since apparently in my mom's words, the womb, right? She was watching, the Final Four while she was pregnant. So this is the only thing I've known, right? And so the learning curve of understanding the game and the nuances of that. I was born in the 80s, so I got to see some of the greatest players we all know, like Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, and Allen Iverson, and like, when it was really, dog eat dog type of basketball. And obviously being born and raised in Philadelphia, there was always a court to get your hands dirty on, right? And so that learning curve of understanding the game and the player's mindset and really what it takes to win for the game of basketball, when it translates to being a referee, those communication tools that I have to use in some of our most intense moments, I can come from an empathetic moment and say, Coach, I understand, you may have wanted this play called, but this is what we have today, right? And it's not that I'm unaware of what's happening in the game, but I obviously always have to serve the game in the most fair way possible. And so, I personally think that has helped me having that learning curve of just always being around it and always understanding, what's going on without actually having to say it out loud. It's like, okay, there's 3 points differential and we got 35 seconds left. They don't have any timeouts. What options are left? Right. And so that has led me to just have an understanding of like how a team might change their intensity of defense or offense, because there's only a certain amount of possessions that are left. And so, I think for me, really just being a fan of the game and really studying the game as a player has allowed me to really put that into officiating super quickly. And then, like, once I started doing it, oh my gosh, I realized this was I had the best seat in the house, Elizabeth, just short of playing, right? Like, who else is as close as I am to the action in the game? Nobody, right? Even the coach just got to stay on one side of the floor, right? They may want to come and get me on the other end, but they can't. They got to stay in
Yeah.
the box. They got to stay over there. So, this is the best seat to the best players in the world, depending on where you were able to referee, but maybe best players in your area. Maybe, right? Like maybe there's some of the best talent you're going to see for that age group. I mean, whatever level you're at, you're a part of the game. You're an intricate part of the game. And for me, I was like, I took one bite and I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so glad I'm here, and it's really just taken off since then.
That's awesome. What was it like to officiate through the Elite Eight during March Madness?
Man, the best thing for me was that I had both teams, right? And so the level of comfort that I had for both teams was high, right? Like I felt comfortable with the coach from both sides, and I felt like, we understood each other. So that was good because I didn't feel like I had to really like work hard on that part. But just to know, again, kind of how we led with how women's basketball has just been on this tear and the momentum, and knowing how much this game would mean to women's basketball, period, and to be chosen for that. I mean, just the honor, right? Like even sitting here today, I get like a little bit of chills, because you don't know who's going to end up there, but you know what the bracket has. And, when the games played out and we knew who it was going to be, for me, I was just so grateful. And I just wanted my grandma to watch it. I wanted my family to be there. And, I'm from Philly, but the game was held in Albany. So we weren't on that West Coast, which helped, So there were so many things that kind of fell into place for me just for my career and having the ability to share that with the people that I love and really, test myself for like that level of scrutiny that comes with that type of game. And working with two great partners and for a great system that, I've poured my life's work into. So it really was just like an amazing full circle moment for me, for sure. But as Kobe would say, the job is
Yes.
not done yet. So, we aspire for more as we continue.
Of course. Do you have a story
Yeah.
from some of those games?
I mean,
Something
what story would you
surprising?
like?
I don't know.
You know, the players are so funny. People don't give them credit. They're so funny because they try to work you, and to be expected. I mean, you expect that from an athlete. I think for me, just any moment that I can have with them that is really not about the game, right? There's a particular play, we have a block shot and everyone's excited. And I just make eye contact with the player and I'm like, you're good. You blocked a shot. You were excited about it. We're good. We're going to play on. Right. And just like kind of like, I see you, you see me. We're going to keep playing. It's like those little moments, like we work hard for that level of respect from those players and vice versa, but to like share in those moments with them, like, I'm putting the ball in play. I'm like, hey, you ready? They're like, no, can I tie my shoe? I'm like, yes, like, but it's like, maybe they're on a 15-point spread and like, no one's thinking about that, but we just share this like very human moment where I'm like, hey, I tie your shoe, like, or they're like, I think she's going to call timeout. Can you give me a second? I'm like, yep, I'll give you a second. I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, we just have like a really cute, human moment in such a big fishbowl, it just, you remind yourself of like, we're all just trying to put a great product on the floor and that we're just trying to survive certain games, right? And for that game, we just knew the impact that one of these teams are going to go to Final Four, one of them not.
Right. Do you all, like collectively have a sense of, like this is part of a history?
Yeah, I mean, they made it very clear. Like, they made it very clear. The people who gave us the assignment. You turned the TV on for the 2 days that they were pumping it up. I mean, it was impossible not to know, right? And my family is following me, right? So they're like, "Oh my God, do you think you have that one?" I'm like, "I don't know," because we obviously can't disclose that until it's game time, right? And so whether people knew I was on the game or not, you already knew what the stakes were, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, as a fan of the game, as someone who respects the game and who have seen both teams throughout the season, even the players that are on those teams, I've followed them just because I'm in multiple leagues and have had the ability to work their games. It's like I knew how important it was for them, just on like an individual level, right? And so, man, it was hard not to know. I think I said to my family, I was like, I felt like everyone in that building was on the edge of their seat from the time the lights came on. And I mean like the lights for practice, right? Because you just knew it was going to be, one to remember for sure.
What made you nervous when you were out there?
Um, you
If
know what's so
anything,
funny?
maybe you didn't.
No, I get you should have a level of nervous because you care, right?
Yeah,
So
of course.
I was nervous, just because I wanted to make sure that I was as prepared as I could be mentally, right? And so, you see, after a while, there's certain plays that you've seen a million times, but that you just never know how people are going to react player wise. So just trying to get a temperament for both teams and making sure that they were all at ease, and able to really focus on the game, whether that was like, heckling from fans or other people who might kind of penetrate that from the outside, really just making sure that I had a feel for that, that they all felt like they could just play the game and focus on that. So I'm always nervous to like make sure that I answer that call appropriately, right? Like, there's always fans to a game, right? There's always some people who might get a little too overzealous. But like you don't want to be so fixated on that you lose sight of the game, but you also want to make sure that the players feel protected, that someone's going to deal with that, right? That they're not going to let them, come at them in a derogatory way or distract them from what they're doing. And so, I always get a little bit of jitters, before a game of that magnitude, or really most games. But as soon as that ball taps, Elizabeth, and they start dribbling, I'm like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I got this. Yeah. it's like being a player. It's like, oh, you're so hyped up, and then you make your first jump shot, and you're like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Like,
Right.
this,
No,
this
it's
is what I've been
totally true.
practicing
Yeah.
so many times. It's just you try to just block out that noise, but it's hard not to feel it, especially when all the lights and the pyrolypic, all the pyros are going off. You're like, oh man, here we go. So but as soon as that ball goes in, or you rotate one time on the end line, or you call it out of bounds, you're like, yeah, it's still the job.
Yep.
It's still the job I'm trained for.
In this quick break, I want to tell you about a cool sports podcast I just discovered. It's called Daily Sports History. As the name implies, it's a daily podcast featuring amazing sports history stories told in about 10 minutes. Like Hear Her Sports, Daily Sports History covers all kinds of sports, from iconic to those you've never heard of. And the October 30th episode is about Violet Palmer, NBA's first female referee. You can find a link to the Violet Palmer episode in the show notes page or at dailysportshistory.com. Now, let's get back to NCAA Division I women's basketball referee Natasha Camy to hear some specifics about how she prepares for games. You talked about preparing, what are the specifics of preparing for that game?
Yeah, yeah. I did the same thing that I try to do on every game, right? Because your habits are what you always resort to, especially when you're nervous, right? And so for me, I really like to make sure that I get to the arena with plenty of time, right? So the required time is 90 minutes. My personal required time for myself is about 2 hours. So depending on who the teams are and if there's going to be hoopla or not, I might try to get there 2.5 hours early because parking, trying to get inside, things of that nature. So, whatever it is, I want to make sure that I give myself more than an hour and a half to prepare for the game. And so that day, I made sure I had my favorite meal, right? I made sure I had my favorite energy drink, right? I made sure I had my nap that day. I made sure that I turned my phone off maybe about an hour before we went down to the arena. Just like you said, there was a lot of hoopla, so I just didn't want any texts, any alerts from ESPN, nothing. I just wanted to focus on the game. It's still just a basketball game. And so for me, mentally, I just wanted to do the same things I do for every game because that repetition and that rhythm is what was going to soothe me, right? And then once I got there, making sure that I warmed up the same way. I still got my ankles taped before the game. I still played a little bit of music to stay loose. We had already, pre-game that game with our conversation the day before and that morning. And so once we got there, there was a lot of conversation with, just the TV talent and what's available to us and the table and some of the more administrative things. So that was a little bit different, but we already knew how we were going to, handle most situations in that game as a crew. So that was great. But it was just really, really good to stick to what I always do, because it's like if I can rely on those things, it can kind of keep me so even, and I'm allowed to do that.
What happens in the pregame call the day before?
Yeah, so we talk about just some tendencies, like maybe if we've had those players before or those coaches before, what was the communication that we had with both those teams, right? Like my relationship with a team or a coach might be different than my partner's, right? And so if there's ever a situation where we might need to communicate something good or bad, you might want to send someone that they're more familiar with,
Ah,
right? Or someone that is more veteran, right? Or someone that is they don't know it all, but they're going to be more receptive to because we have history, right?
sure,
So
right.
it's like, you want to try to kind of go through some of that stuff of like, here are some situations that could happen because we have a team that likes to shoot the ball, we have a team that likes to drive, here are some decisions that we might have to make in regards of like place in the basket or protecting the shooter, right? And then if there's a decision that needs to be made on maybe giving something higher than just a common foul, maybe an intentional foul or maybe a technical foul, here are the ways that we should handle that, and how are we going to do this as a crew so that we're being concise, but we are all on agreement on what those things are, right? Like, you don't want to have me being quick to over penalize someone and then you not thinking that it's enough contact, right? Like, we need to
Mm.
see plays, we need to agree on the plays that we've seen and how we're going to adjudicate them based off of the type of talent that we have on the floor. And so those are the conversations that you want to go over because, coaches always say, our bosses always say, we have to be consistent. And in order to do that, we have to have that same level of like how we're going to communicate, how we're going to call the game, at least a baseline level, so that we can stay in that consistent realm as best as we can. We're still
Right.
three individuals. People make mistakes every game, but if we can agree on, certain very key items, then I think we can do a decent job.
Has officiating changed much as the women's game grows or improves or
Yeah,
changes?
I mean, when I started, we had DVDs. And I had to go and ask the person who was the Dobo to burn their hard drive onto mine. Like, it was a whole process, right?
Hmm.
And now they can just send you a link and you're good to go. Or, there's different video platforms that we're able to use and see it immediately. And so just in regards of like seeing a play that you got wrong and being able to analyze that for officiating is drastic, right? Like, you may not have been able to make those small adjustments game to game because it would take you a week to see the game, right? Like, think about like a DVD. Like, you'd have to have a player to use it, right? Like, you're not going to be able to maybe watch it on the plane, or if you did have like a laptop that could play it, like, you need to be able to see it from a certain angle, right? So now we have 10 to 15 angles for the games that I'm working, at least two. You can see maybe more about the communication that you have with players and coaches. So you can fine tune as you go. You also can watch a previous game very easily. So if you're having the second matchup of a conference game, you can go back and see what are some of the things that happened in the previous game, right? To just get an idea of like, what are some of the calls that they had to make. And so just in a training situation from when I started to now is completely different because the accessibility of video that's allowed in our game. And then obviously being able to watch the games, right? Like, it was a big deal to be on ESPN Plus.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
Big deal,
Yep.
right? And now, thankfully we got ESPN all the way down to you. We're on news, SEC Network, the Big Ten Network, right? Like Peacock, Fox. I mean, come on, right? So you can watch different teams. Sometimes when I'm in locker rooms, like, I'll watch teams from different conferences kind of towards the end of the season because if I get them in the NCAA tournament, I want to know how they play,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't want my
Interesting.
first time with, an ACC team to be the first time I've ever seen them play in the second round. Like, I need to know that, right? And you just don't know where you're going to go. So I try to watch, like, when the Pac-12 was on, like, if it was on in the gym, I would watch in the gym. Like, I was just like, oh, UCLA is on, let me watch them now, because I don't know if we're going to have them or not, and I wanted to be able to see a West Coast matchup just so I could show respect to their game and to their players and who's important to them. And so, you just never know, where life's going to take you in that postseason run. And so for me, it's all about like making sure that I do my homework on all sides, not just the teams that I have, but the teams I could potentially have.
What about in terms of, like the quality of play
Yeah, yeah,
growing?
yeah. Man, like I jokingly say, like when I played, we only started in April was like early, like in regards of like training and stuff like that. But now, I mean, they play all year round, right? And so if you think about the ability to like work on your strength and your quickness and your basketball IQ, just because of the ability to have multiple levels of tournament. I mean, if you think about our basketball season, right? There's athletes unlimited. Now they have unrivaled for this like pro athletes. Those young ladies are going to get better for the W just because they have more ways to play and more opportunities to play. And so even for our game, just having the amateur circuit get so much longer, and the amount of focus of players just playing maybe just one sport too, so they can really develop multiple left-handed, right-handed plays. It's just completely evolved the game.
Have you had to change your refereeing, or I don't know. I mean, I would
Um,
think maybe the speed is increasing, and
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I'm curious.
I mean, we're getting older and they're getting younger, so I mean, the
Sorry
importance
about
of
that.
physical fit. Yeah, I know. Jesus. If you find a way to slow that down, Elizabeth,
Yeah, I'll
please
let you
tell
know.
me. We could take that offline. Goodness.
Right.
But no, I mean, I think physical fitness is so important, right? A lot of the things I see in the NBA always end up trickling down. I jokingly say like the James Harden move where he would jump forward and trip with his leg. I promise you, I saw it like 3 years later in one of my games, right? So, they're watching the same basketball that everyone else is watching and trying to figure out ways that they can, improve their game, not just on speed, but just even some of the more veteran plays that are out there, right? Where, they're just trying to find a way to use the rules to their advantage, like as they should, right? But just, I don't want the first time of me seeing it in my game because a lot of that stuff starts from the top and it works its way down.
Yeah, I mean that's just another thing that now that all these games are more available to watch. I mean everybody's
Yep.
watching them, including the
Yeah.
players. Yeah,
Yeah.
super
Including players.
interesting.
Yeah.
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 Well, the NCAA season is about to start. How are you preparing for that? How have you been
Man.
preparing?
So yeah, so the NCAA season's about to start, and I have Referee Ready, which is a company that I started to help train officials, not just in regards of X's and O's, but also on a holistic front. So
Wait, I'm going
we've
to
been
stop
doing,
you there. What does that mean? Tell me more about that.
yeah. So when we think about officials, some people think that we go out there, we show up, we call some plays, and we head home. The job is way more complex than that. And the mental component that's needed, we just talked about keeping up with the speed of the play, the physical demands that are needed for most basketball officials who are not in a pro system. We get paid as independent contractors. So whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, you need to have a certain LLC set up so that your payments are going to you as an independent contractor, not just you as a human, like as a person, right? So you have to have an understanding of being an entrepreneur, at least on how do I set up an LLC and what are the tax implications on that. And then just focusing on, how do you prepare for a game mentally? Like I walk through like my process for a day. A lot of that was just how do I mentally get myself ready, right? Like what are the comforts that I need in order to keep my mind settled and not anxious? Well, who's giving that advice and who's figuring out what those things are for officials on a day-to-day basis. And so for Referee Ready, when we say we focus on holistic, we really want to focus on the person internally and externally and give them some tools to diffuse situations, to be able to communicate better in high impact times, to recognize what their triggers are. You'd be surprised what your trigger can be, whether it's a closeness of a coach talking to you or the pace of play where it may feel chaotic, but you don't understand. Do not understand because you're not fluent in the rules. How do you get better at doing the rules, right? And if you have confidence in your ability and your job, then that confidence shows on the court. If it shows on the court, then you make better calls. If you make better calls, you don't get yelled at as much. Right? So, I mean, it all feeds in, right? And
Right,
so
right.
we can't just talk to people as though, hey, this is a block, this is a charge. We have to get to the root of, how do we get the best out of them? And we got to think about them as a full individual. So with Referee Ready, we've been doing a lot of trainings this last 2.5 months, focusing on, we've had some coverage changes. So an official on the court is responsible for certain areas on the court when they're in like a half court set. And so we've talked about, what the changes are for this year and how we're supposed to call plays depending on where we are on the floor and what those plays look like, so visually look like. We've had some of the officials that I spoke about earlier about how they were first year in the WNBA, maybe first year in the G League, spoke about some of the things that they learned in that realm of basketball in a professional set and how that is going to help them in their college game this year. So they gave some physical examples of that. We had someone come on and talk about just making sure that you put your mental health on the forefront and not the back, because anything that you keep pushing back is going to come to light. It may not come out November 4th on opening day, but it might come out February 12th when you don't need it, right? And
Right.
so, if you're stressed out at home and you haven't figured out how to balance your new schedule and your support system, like you really should focus on that now before it really gets intense and you're tired and every game is just way, way more intense because they're trying to get to a playoff game, right? And so really trying to do that work on the front end. Even for myself, like having these speakers come on, it just reignites the importance of those things for me to make sure I lay out, what I think my season would look like for me mentally, for my family, what are the expectations I've put on myself. And then, in regards to the rules, we have a test every year as officials through the NCAA. So we've gone over the test to just refresh our minds about some of the rules that we've always had and then some of the points of emphasis that we should look for in the season. And so, I'm getting down to the wire here before our first real world game, but we have some exhibition games coming up. So I'll be able to really apply some of the stuff that we've done virtually and in some scrimmages and some games that have like a clock and a monitor, which will be good. So you kind of get like a little bit more of a test drive. And so by the time the fourth comes, I'll be ready to go, locked and loaded.
Like when you're an athlete, you have these, like components of being an athlete in a particular sport that you're trying to improve. Is it similar for you as an official? Like, what are the things that you're looking to improve for yourself? And how do you judge those? And like, what are you actually doing?
Every official is different because they're in different points of their career. And so for me, where I am currently, I'm always looking for better ways to communicate, not just with players and coaches, but with my crew, right? And so when you're put into more leadership roles, it's so important that something that I take for granted as like, oh, I've seen this play 1,000 times. I just have to tell them this, right? A newer official or a younger official may have trouble communicating that to a coach or to a player, right? And so for me this year, I want to be cognizant of the differences that these people have because you being a newer official, Elizabeth, on a game with me, I have a different comfort level than you do, right? But I want to instill in you the confidence that, hey, if you have to deliver good news or bad news, it's okay. I have your back. This is what you need to say, right? I can't just go out to the game and just work my game and focus on what I need to do well. I have to now think about it from a team aspect, right? Like, how does the crew do well tonight? And who are the people that we have and how do they like to communicate, right? I can't go into these games pretending that I don't know these coaches and players enough to know how they like to be spoken to. And how do I share that with someone else who's not as familiar with those coaches and teams? Because we've had a change in conferences. Two of the conferences that I'm in, we've added 8 total teams, 4 to the 10 and 4 to the 12.
Hmm.
So those are new teams, new dynamics, new interactions that we're all going to have. And how are we going to be able to figure this out so that we're always on the same page? And so for me, I really want to work hard on really listening to those coaches and those players to understand, ways that I can communicate good with them and do a better job. But also, how do I incorporate that into my crew so that we're all communicating well to them, right? Like, it doesn't help for them to really like me and hate you,
Right,
right?
right.
It doesn't make the game go smoother if you're not being able to get through to this coach just on like a interaction base, right? Like I have to do a good job of sharing tips and tricks that have worked well for me, And maybe you can't do it the way that I do it, but you can do it in your own way, and we can still serve this game well, right? Because communication is such a big part of our game. I mean, we're communicating with people like the entire time, really, right? Like we're communicating with the table, we're communicating with the coaches and the players and the cheerleaders who are on the end line, and the security guy who makes sure that no one comes on the court. And, I mean, it's just, you'd be surprised how many like small touch points you have. And so when you're overwhelmed because this is a brand new school and a brand new site, it's like, how do I recognize that and make sure that I check in and say, hey, are you good? Did I pregame well enough so that you feel prepared? Did I let you know that, hey, in order to get to a Midwest school, sometimes you can drive. You don't have to get on a plane, right? Like these are things that are learning curves for me because I've done it a lot, but maybe they don't know. Or what's the closest airport to this school in the South, right? You may not want to do that one because it's hard to get in and out of that place, right? So now you don't have stress of trying to get to that game because I've given you that information.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. And like these seem really small, but they add up. They add up to that stress because I've seen it where, maybe a partner has struggled to get in and, we just assume that they knew where they were going, but they're new to the conference. They're not new as officials. Right. And so maybe we don't have them all the way mentally there for the first few minutes of the court because they're just trying to get themselves together. And so
Right.
in order to get the best out of our team, for me, what I want to do is just really be a good partner and really be aware of, the people that are on my crew and how I can help them. Because we have so many new components along with this new, very big and brighter light on women's basketball. And so, obviously as an official, I'm cheering for us and I want us to do a good job. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we're prepared. And I just want to make sure that I do my part for that.
You've mentioned it a lot since we started talking today. And while I was getting ready to talk to you, this word came up in my mind a lot, and that's confidence.
Mm.
And we talk about that word a lot on Hear Her Sports. Like, what is your take on confidence, and how do you get it? And how are you? I mean, I'm assuming at Referee Ready Academy, you talk about confidence, and
Yes.
like, how are you presenting it? How are you helping your students?
It's so funny you bring that up because last night that was a lot of our conversation. It was about confidence. The subject that we went over with Referee Ready on our latest call was about being a good partner, right? And having the confidence to come in and help or assist or provide information when needed, right? And so, what I try to tell people that I'm mentoring or people that I interact with or even our members is like, my confidence that works for me in officiating is understanding the job, right? Like whether that's the rules, whether that's the mechanics, whether that's, like I spoke about, where to go and who's going to be out there, what type of play we're going to have. The more prepared I could feel for the job I'm going to do on the floor, the more confident I am, right? Because I know what my preparation was to be here, right? And now there's always moving pieces because we're dealing with young women. So, we're holding on, right? Like she could be having a good day. She could not be having a good day, right? But I also understand that they're fourth, in the race and that if they win this game, they don't have to play the first day of the tournament. But if they lose this game, they do, right? So there's a different energy that's going to be in this game. And so because I prepared myself for all the scenarios that could present itself, and I also have a great foundation, right, of like understanding the job, my confidence is already at a pretty good high, right? And there's always things in the game that we're going to get wrong and we could have handled better, or maybe a situation comes up that you didn't prepare for, right? But I always resort back to the training that I've done and the belief that I do understand the job. Confidence allows me to at least make an educated decision and feel comfortable that this was the best decision that I felt in this particular time. Now, does that always work out? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I am going into it with good intention, and I'm willing to deal with the consequences of maybe I didn't know it or maybe I could have done it better. But I'm going to give my best chance because I at least prepared as much as I could.
Yeah, you strike me as a preparer.
I do like to prepare. I don't like surprise, Elizabeth. Just like, I don't like surprise birthday parties. I don't like random, I don't like it. I like to know what's coming. Okay.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay.
When I get to the line, I want to be prepared. Yeah, maybe.
Definitely a West Philly thing for sure.
That's right. So I understand that your Referee Ready Academy, one of the main focuses is getting ready your participants for the selection camps. And I may not be calling them
Hmm.
the right things, but basically the camps that decide if they're going to be positioned on, in games. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And like, how do those camps work? Like, what actually are they? What are they getting into when they go to those
Yeah, for
camps?
sure. My goodness. Yeah. So they're tryout camps.
Okay.
And so every coordinator who's hired by a conference maybe has multiple conferences or they just have a conference, they will hold a tryout camp. The tryout camp might look to a parent or a student as an AAU event, but they are opportunities for our bosses to see talent and recognize talent on how they handle those games that are, pretty well played games, right? And so it's a scouting process for those coordinators to find officials for their conferences that they're going to assign in the fall winter. Okay, and so what we try to do at our training camps is provide them with an opportunity to try to get the kinks out, right? The training camps, we plan to do them in between tryout camps so that when they go to a tryout camp, they've already had the evaluation process similar to what they would see at the tryout camp, right? It was brought to my attention just from, being someone who was evaluating at those tryout camps for, the bosses that I worked for. A lot of people just didn't know what they didn't know, right? Like how important the CCA manual is, which is our manual on how to officiate for college women's basketball, like where to stand, where to look, what you're responsible for. It's hard for me to spend one-on-one time with those people at a tryout camp than it is for me to do it at a training camp, right? And we can go into some of the nuances and the importance of that. We can show you visual examples. It's just a different environment. So now when you go to a tryout camp, I don't have to teach you what you learned last week. You're coming in with that as now your new baseline, right? Because you've spent the time, you've been outside, like running it up and down the court, and now you've seen what to do because we've had the training camps, right? And so we had a lot of success last year being able to have our training camps in between tryout camps because it allowed those officials to be prepared. They met some of the people that they would meet at the tryout camp at our training camp. So there's a level of networking and familiarity there, right, that they would not have had access to. And we've had some success with people who were only working high school get picked up in lower level college, people who were doing no high school at all getting picked up in multiple high school leagues because they were in a training environment that allowed them to be successful at a tryout camp. And so, we're really trying to prepare people so that they can find a way to make that extra living for some people or find a way to stay close to the game that they love or just be involved with a sport that we all think that we know so well until you put the stripes on. You're like, oh, this is harder than I thought. Yes, it is. And so we're educating people on that realm. I had a very older gentleman literally tell me, he wrote me this very nice email and he said, the one thing I know for sure is that I'm going to put the remote down and I'm not going to yell at the referees anymore. I was like, I know that's right. He's like, I have so much more respect for you because I did not realize how much preparation went into it. And he's,
That's
he's
funny.
been working high school, but he's like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
Like what he knows for sure is that he is not built for Division I basketball.
Right.
Right? So like we want him obviously, but like, maybe don't be as harsh on us, right? There's a lot of things that we're trying to get right out there. So, if we do a little education in the meantime, that's also good.
Yeah. Did you have women in mind when you started Referee Ready? I mean, are you
I
trying to?
did.
Oh,
I
okay.
did. Of course. As a woman, of
Yes.
course. Of course. I think of little Tashas. I'm doing this for the little Tashas,
Yeah.
like I said to my wife the other day, I said, I feel like as little Tosh, I always fought for big Tosh, right? I never wanted to get in trouble. I didn't want to have a record, right? I didn't want to, do anything to put my life in jeopardy, where I couldn't be successful as an adult. And now I feel like I'm spending my adult years fighting for little Tosh, right? So that she can have information and she can find it easily accessible and she can see herself in a world that maybe sometimes doesn't always resemble her right? She can find other women, she can find other men. She can be in an environment where it's warm and it's a community, and it builds you from the inside out, right? Like things that you don't realize you actually need and that you should be focused on. Like I'm doing it for her. So of course I'm thinking about women, right? But our men, we are able to help them communicate better with women partners and women coaches from just being able to like point out some things that they would never have known,
Hmm.
right? And so there's been so much impact on that. And I think because it's coming from a woman and, they're in the women's game, they're more receptive to that. And I always say to them, I'm like, you would never know this because a woman is not going to tell you this, right? If you've already made her upset or you've said it in a way that was offensive to her, like she's probably washing her hands and moving on, right? But I'm going to take the time and say, hey, that tone for this particular play is not appropriate, right?
Interesting.
Or you putting your hand on her shoulder and you're taller than her, although it's a positive interaction, aesthetically, that does not look good. It looks like you're talking down to her. Now, he's not trying to do that. That's not what his intent is, right? But me giving him that information of like, you should be aware of that helps him, right? Helps him communicate better, right? And we have a lot of women coaches. Thankfully, we're getting more women coaches. So you have to be aware of the way that you're coming off to both sides. And I think the men who have come to our camp have been able to get so much value because they're hearing it from a woman who's like, "Hey, I hear you, I feel you, but you should be aware of this."
Right.
Right? And it's coming from a place of like, "I'm only trying to help you out." And I think that is something that they're not typically going to get.
Your academy is still new, but have you seen a sort of an increase in the number of women, becoming officials and getting further
Yeah,
up the ladder?
yes,
Okay,
for sure. So,
cool.
we were definitely new, but I've been mentoring people probably earlier than I should. I come from a family of social workers, so they were always about giving back and helping. And so, just in the people that I was helping, very early in my career, and now under the system of Referee Ready, we've seen more women come into our training camps and wanted to officiate. We've had more ex-players come out. Um, there was a young lady who was from our Philadelphia area. She played at a school in the Missouri Valley, and I used to ref her, right? And so she came our first year, and she knew absolutely nothing, and it was very cute and endearing. And then we got her into a high school, system and board. She worked a whole year of high school. When she came back this year, Elizabeth, I was like, "Who is this girl?" Right?
That's
But now
awesome.
we've been able to see her build off of that, and then she brought two other girls,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And
Yeah.
then I paid for three other girls from New York to come in and get training, and they were super new, right? And so them being able to see that it's ran by a woman and that they had other young women, I'm talking about like early 20s, there trying to learn. It didn't feel like maybe I shouldn't be here. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so just
Yeah.
as first year maybe we had 40 people. Last year we had over 100 people, right? And as we continue to build, the word will get out, the image will get out, and you know how it is. Like word of mouth is probably our strongest advocate, but just getting former players into it is the exciting thing to me.
Hmm.
Especially the ones that always tell me how to do my job. Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite. I'm like,
Yeah.
you would be a great ref. I'm not even mad at you. You should come to my camp.
That's
Like let's settle this once and for all. Let's see how it goes when the table is turned.
right.
And it's great banter, but it's always very funny.
Have you had mentors?
I've had the women in our business have been soldiers, man, because this game, you had to do it as an avocation, not necessarily as a job.
Yeah.
And so just economically. And so they were, moms, right? They were working full-time jobs. They were, not necessarily always able to work with other women, and they still showed up every day. They still gave their all to a game that may have had 10 fans there, right? Like we discussed earlier about how, maybe it was on TV, maybe it wasn't, right? So
Right.
you go 30 games straight working your tail off and no one even knows the box score. Yeah, like I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's so, and I just think about, all the women who came before me, not even ones that just look like me, but just like the women that I met, when I started and even now who've been in it for such a long time. Like, the way that they would reach back and be like, "Hey, Tosh, like kind of what I said earlier about you may not want to go to that airport, you might want to do another one, right? Or here's this code, for national to use for rentals. It's super helpful. It helps kind of cut into the bottom line a little bit, right? Or this coach is not a fan of women talking to him very closely. You might want to give him some space, like nuances, right?
Right.
That as a woman we go through that maybe men don't necessarily have to go through. And so, one thing about me, Elizabeth, I'm going to ask a question. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to, want to hear your story because I think there's so much power in that, and I've learned from every single one of them because all of us understand that what we're doing is so important for the generation behind us. And all of them were so helpful to me to just give me, even if it's just like a couple things, it allowed me to be able to do better the next time I went out there because now I have this level of information, right?
Sure.
And so it's almost like an unspoken sisterhood where it's like we see each other and we're like, hey, you good? You need anything? You want something? Or have you spoken to this person? Or like we're protectors of the game because it's our game and we want it to grow. I'm sure coaches feel the same and players feel the same because women's basketball was like this like really great thing we were trying to show off all the time. As officials, it's the same way. We're like, we got to take care of this game and we got to make sure that there's more of us. Like, are you okay? Do you need anything? And I think that that's just really one of the things that kept me in the game as long as it has.
I think we are getting better and better and better at helping each other out.
Yes. I really think there's enough space for all of us. I
Oh,
really
of
do.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
There's just enough, and even if it's not your turn, right? It's okay if you're doing the work and you're in it for the right reasons. Maybe you'll get that, or maybe you'll get something even better.
Right.
Like maybe you'll be able to create a whole different pathway. Like I got started, I wasn't thinking about setting up referee ready, but I realized that there was more that was needed in the nuance of officiating, and now I want to fix that. I was just thinking today before our interview, I'm like, the amount of people that got hired into new jobs and conferences because of my camp. Like if I never held that camp, who's to say how long it would have taken them? And just to know I have an impact on someone's life, like to be able to have access to maybe a different financial situation or, get to visit new locations because of, where they're assigned, that I had a small piece of that because I organized an event that they could come and learn at. I mean, come on. Like that's it right there, girl.
It's
And
awesome.
I mean, I'm still in the race. I'm still trying to get to the end, the last game of the year. But if my legacy is that too, I mean, come on, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our time is coming to an end, but before you go, I would love for you to set us up for this coming season of the women's NCAA basketball. And like, what should we be looking for? What should we focus on? Anything. Get
You
us ready.
know, yeah, I mean, as a fan, we have so many great players that are ready for their time to shine. We have so many conferences that have new matchups, right? Like new rivalries to be born. If you've been watching, NCAA football, you can see that already developing. And so for the women's game, we're going to have our own level of that. The level of play has continuously gotten better, and everyone who's involved with women's basketball this year is just as dedicated and committed to making sure that we keep up with that level and giving to the game in that way. If you see an official, be kind. Be kind. Know that we're working our tails off to ensure that the best talent is taken care of on the floor, from the first person off the bench to the last person. We were unbiased and we just want to make sure that we serve the game correctly. So just have a little humbleness for us. But this year I'm super excited because we have so much momentum from the last season to the W, to this upcoming season. We also, I'm sure we'll see some of our favorite players at games, like that whole like sideline thing, so it'll be good to see, the younger players see people that they, aspired for. The community of women's basketball, I think, is really in a movement, not a moment, and really stay with us. We're super, super excited for, some of the changes that we've seen and just the matchups that we're going to have. And there's going to be some really, really good talent to really spread around. And so I'm super excited. I'm super grateful to even have a small piece of it.
So let's finish this up with a goofy question.
Yeah.
Your tops that you wear, how do they stay tucked in your pants? You're doing so much work. I mean, like, is that a
Yo,
shirt
that's a
or is it a
great
bodysuit?
question. That's a great freaking question. I love this question, Elizabeth. Like, you got to be one of the few people to ask me that. So we wear these shirt tucks. So shout out to Shirt Tucks. There's a company that's actually called Shirt Tucks. But at our uniform stores, there are two different ways you can wear it. You can wear it wrapped around your thigh and it holds onto your shirt to keep it really like a taut look, right? I personally like to wrap it around my foot. So basically, you put it on your foot like a sock and it stays kind of like in the arch of your foot. Put your shoe on and it pulls that shirt down so it looks like it's tucked the whole time. And since it's pliable because it moves, even though we're twisting and turning, that shirt stays tucked in. And you want to have that look, Elizabeth. If you're a referee, you don't ever want your shirt coming out. That is big no-no. Big
You
no-no.
guys look good. I knew there was something happening in there.
You'd be surprised the amount of things we have on. That's a whole nother podcast. I can't even go into that. Because,
oh, no. Okay.
My wife saw me getting dressed one time. I was like, what? You wear all of that? I'm like, girl. Like I said, they're getting faster and we're getting older. So you got to do what you got to do, you know?
Well, great. Well, on that next podcast, we should talk about what your training tips are because I know you are in shape because
yes, girl.
You guys run a lot.
We run so much. We run so much. Got to have that leg strength. Just a little tip for you. Got to have that leg strength.
Well, it has been great to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me on. And I really, really appreciate your time.
That is today's episode with Natasha Camy, an NCAA Division I women's basketball referee and founder of the referee school, Referee Ready Academy. Thank you, Natasha, for making time for Hear Her Sports just before the NCAA basketball season got going, and thank you, Jalen, for putting this all together. Hear Her Sports is one of the few podcasts that give female athletes and women in sport the time and space to talk about what is important to them and about their sports. Thank you for listening. There are several ways you can help us to continue making this show. One is to tell your friends. Personal recommendations are how most people find new podcasts. 2, make a donation. Each dollar supports the work that goes into producing Hear Her Sports. Go to the donate page at hearhersports.com to donate directly, or go to the support tab to find links to our Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and affiliate programs. And finally, the most important way to support the show is keep listening. Well, maybe telling your friends is the most important one. No, listening is. Both are important, so do both. If a friend told you to listen and this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. There are lots of other episodes to discover. For more on basketball, listen to episode 170 with Lynn Holtzman, NCAA VP of Women's Basketball, or episode 167 with Mary Ellen Kelly, the sports dietitian for New York Liberty. But make sure you catch every episode because each guest is amazing. It's a pleasure to be part of the community of women's sports fans together. Until next time, bye-bye.